We were in a beige mediation room off Scottsdale Road, bad fluorescent lighting, a coffee machine that kept gurgling in the corner. My attorney had just laid 3 years of financial records across the table. $1. $4 million in revenue from a digital marketing agency I'd built in secret while my husband controlled every dollar I spent. He didn't say a word for almost a full minute. His jaw tightened. His hands went flat on the table, like he was trying to stop them from shaking. Then he looked at me, quiet and cold, and said, "You lied to me." And sitting there, knowing what I knew, that he'd been hiding a rental property and $174,000 in unreported income through a shell LLC in his brother's name, all I could think was, we both did. But I just looked at him and said nothing. What neither of us knew yet was that the only thing deciding who walked away with a company and who walked away with an IRS referral wasn't who was cruel or who was controlling. It was who filed their taxes honestly. But let me start from the beginning. Quick thing before we dive in: if this one hooks you, smash that like button and subscribe. New stories every day. This is not the story I thought I was going to tell you. I thought this was a story about a controlling husband who got what he deserved. It's not. It's a story about two people who both hid money from each other during their marriage, and how a single legal distinction who filed their taxes honestly determined which one walked away with a company and which one walked away with an IRS referral. I'm the one who walked away with the company. I still can't decide if I deserved to. I'm posting this from a throwaway because my divorce was finalized 11 days ago, and I still can't sleep through the night. Not from fear, though. I think my body just forgot how to rest, and now it's slowly relearning. But I need to be honest with you from the start, because this story only works if I am, and I was not honest for a very long time. I married Derek in October 2017. We'd met at a friend's birthday party in Scottsdale, the year before one of those backyard things with string lights and too many IPAs. He worked in commercial real estate. I was a marketing coordinator making $58,400 a year. After our daughter Lily was born in 2019, he insisted I quit. His words, "Why would we pay some stranger to raise our kids when you're right here?" Our son Caleb came in August 2020. By then, I was a full-time stay-at-home mother with no salary, no autonomy, and constant performance review from a man who monitored every dollar I spent through a banking app. If I spent $11.40 at a children's museum parking lot, he'd text me a screenshot with just the word "why." When I bought our 3-year-old a $1.34 pair of light-up sneakers from Target, he called me from his office to ask if I planned on bankrupting us one impulse purchase at a time. At dinner parties, he'd say, "Oh, Jenna doesn't really work, she manages the house. By year 3 it was, I carry this family. You spend what I earn. That's the arrangement." I want to say one thing about Derek, though, because it's relevant to the moral arithmetic that comes later. He wasn't always this person. After Lily was born, he broke down one night and told me he was terrified of becoming his father, who went bankrupt when Derek was 12 and moved the family into a 2-bedroom apartment in Glendale. That fear was real, but fear of not being enough turned into needing to control everything, and controlling everything turned into needing to diminish anyone who might not need him. His mother, Diane, reinforced the walls. She'd email me articles about how stay-at-home mothers develop dependent personalities, then forward job listings for part-time receptionist positions at dental offices. So Derek told me I couldn't work because of the kids. His mother implied I was less than because I didn't work. I watched that trap close, and I didn't leave. I built a company instead. I'm still not sure which would have been braver. It started at a preschool auction in early 2022. I think it was February, actually no. It was March, because Lily had just had her birthday the week before. A parent named Marcus, who owned a plumbing company in Mesa, complained that he'd paid $500 for a sponsorship banner, but couldn't get his own website to show up on Google. I pulled up his site on his phone right there. Broken links, wrong phone number, stock photos of smiling plumbers who clearly lived in Sweden. I told him, half joking, I could fix it over a weekend. He said he'd pay me $400 if I could get his phone ringing. I used to build landing pages and run paid search campaigns at my old agency. That knowledge hadn't gone anywhere. It had just been sitting there for 3 years while I wiped down high chairs and sorted laundry. I rebuilt Marcus's site in 4 days, using a free WordPress theme and whatever I could remember from my marketing career. Set up his Google business profile, wrote service descriptions targeting Mesa and temp zip codes, built a basic Google Ads campaign with a $300 monthly budget. Within 6 weeks, his inbound calls went from 4 a week to 17. He told every contractor he knew. By the end of that first month, I had 3 clients and $847 in revenue. I almost cried. Actually, no. I did cry. In my car, in the Safeway parking lot. I registered an LLC under my maiden name, Jenna Calloway, in April 2022. Calloway Digital. I used my mom's address for the paperwork and opened a separate bank account at a credit union across town, one Derek didn't know about. My service was simple. Take over a small business's entire online presence. Website, Google Ads, local SEO, social media if they wanted it. Monthly retainer, usually between $800 and $2,000 depending on scope. Roofers, electricians, HVAC companies, a mobile dog groomer, a pest control operation in Chandler. Blue-collar businesses run by people who were great at their trade and terrible at marketing. Now I need to tell you about the lying, because that's what it was. I know hiding a business from your spouse sounds exciting when you're reading it on the internet, but actually living it, it's just lying. Constant, grinding, daily lying that ate away at something inside me that I don't think I've fully gotten back. I lied about what I was doing, where my attention was, why I was on my phone. I lied by omission, every single day for over 2 years. I am not the hero of this story. I'm the narrator, and the narrator was a liar. When people tell me I was brave for building this company in secret, I think about all the lies, and brave is not the word that comes to mind. The first real close call was in September 2022. Derek came home 40 minutes early while I was on a Zoom call with a new client in the spare bedroom. I had my laptop open on the folding desk with 2 browser tabs showing ad performance dashboards. When I heard the garage door, I slammed the laptop shut so hard the screen wobbled. He came upstairs and found me sitting in the room pretending to fold laundry. He asked what I was doing in here with the door closed. I told him I'd been watching a parenting webinar about Caleb's sleep regression. He said, "Great, another expert telling you what you're doing wrong," and went to take a shower. My hands didn't stop shaking for an hour. That night, lying in bed next to him, I realized something that made my skin crawl. I was doing the exact thing to Derek that Derek was doing to me. I was hiding financial information from my spouse. The reasons were different. The mechanics were the same. I filed that thought in the back of my brain and didn't look at it again for 2 years. But it was there the whole time, like a crack in a foundation that you learn to step over instead of fixing. The second close call was worse. In February 2023, a client named Doug who ran a roofing company left me a voicemail while my phone was on the kitchen counter. Derek was making coffee 3 feet away, maybe less. The message played on speaker because I'd forgotten to turn off that setting which, looking back, was incredibly stupid of me. Doug's voice filled the kitchen. "Jenna, the February numbers look great. Wanted to talk about expanding the campaign into." I lunged across the kitchen and grabbed the phone. Derek stared at me. I said it was a robocall from some marketing company that keeps calling, and I keep forgetting to block the number. He shook his head and said, "We're probably on every spam list in Arizona because of your online shopping." I changed every notification and call setting on my phone that night and didn't sleep until 4 in the morning. Not because I'd almost been caught, because of how fast and how smoothly I'd lied. It came out of me like breathing. I didn't like the person who could do that, but I needed to be that person, so I kept doing it. The third close call was in August 2023. Derek picked up my phone while I was giving Caleb a bath. He was going through a phase where he'd only use the dinosaur towel and would scream if you tried any other one. And Derek called out from the living room, "Why do you have Slack on your phone?" I yelled back that a group of moms from Lily's school had started using it to coordinate carpool schedules. He muttered something about women turning everything into a group chat and put it down. If he'd swiped once to the left, he would have seen channels named Vala Plumbing, Chandler Pest Pro, and Eastside HVAC. One swipe, that one took days to recover from because Slack had client names right there in the channel list. One idle finger swipe, and my entire hidden life would have just collapsed. I lay awake thinking about the legal term I didn't know yet but would learn later. Breach of fiduciary duty between spouses. I was $312,000 deep into building an undisclosed asset during the marriage. I wasn't just hiding from Derek anymore. I was building a liability. The fourth incident is one I never told anyone, not even Rachel, my attorney. In November 2023, I was working at midnight on a pitch deck for a property management company. Derek was asleep, or I thought he was asleep. I had my laptop open in bed, the screen brightness turned all the way down, typing as quietly as I could, which, if you've never tried it, is like trying to whisper with your fingers. He rolled over. I froze. He opened one eye and looked at me, and for about 3 seconds I was certain this was it. He said, "You're going to ruin your eyes." Then he rolled back over and went to sleep. I sat there for 10 full minutes without moving, without breathing, with a pitch deck worth $42,000 in annual revenue glowing on the screen 6 inches from his face. The next day, I started doing all my late-night work in the bathroom with the fan on for white noise, sitting on the closed toilet lid with my laptop on a bath towel across my knees. That's where I built most of Q4 2023. On a toilet, I'd sit there from 11 at night until 2 in the morning, answering client emails, reviewing campaign analytics, drafting proposals, while the bathroom fan hummed and my husband snored through the wall. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the mirror across from the toilet, a woman in pajamas running a 6-figure company from a bath towel, and I'd think, is this resourcefulness or is this insanity? Never did figure that one out. The business grew steadily because the model was basically built for concealment, even though I didn't plan it that way. Everything ran from my laptop and phone. No inventory to hide, no boxes to explain. Just me, my skills, a laptop Derek assumed was full of Pinterest boards, and the margins of time between his sleep and the children's nap schedules. I brought on my first subcontractor in late 2022, a freelance graphic designer, to help with website builds, a second in early 2023 for social media management. I managed everything through cloud tools that looked exactly like any other app on a phone that a mother might use. Derek literally said to me once, "Always on that phone doing nothing." By the end of 2023, Callaway Digital had done $312,000 in revenue, 22 active clients on monthly retainers. I'd reinvested heavily. Project management tools, a proper accounting setup, a CPA named Helen who specialized in small business taxes. My take-home was around $40,000 for the year, sitting untouched in that credit union account. I was afraid to spend it, not because I didn't want a god. I wanted to, but because I was afraid Derek would notice a change in my confidence or my posture, or the way I carried myself. The business was growing every month, and I was working harder than I'd ever worked in my life, all in the hours that Derek had decided were worthless. In March of 2024, Derek started getting suspicious, not about the business, about me. He said I seemed different, distracted. He said I was always on my phone, and that I'd been distant. One night he stood in the doorway of the bedroom and said, flat out, "If you're talking to someone, you need to tell me right now." He meant another man. The idea that I might be building something professionally hadn't entered the range of possibilities in his mind. I told him I was exhausted from the kids. He seemed to accept that, but started checking my phone more often. I moved Slack to a hidden folder and started using a browser-based client instead. Then in June 2024, I made the mistake that cracked everything open. And honestly, it was such a dumb mistake. I accidentally sent a client proposal to our shared home printer instead of saving it as a digital file. 12 pages, Callaway Digital letterhead, my maiden name, a proposed monthly retainer of $3,500. Derek confronted me that evening with the printout in his hand and said, "What is this?" I didn't have some composed response ready. My voice was shaking. I told him I'd been doing a little freelance marketing work on the side. Nothing serious, just a few hours here and there to keep my brain from turning to mush. He looked at the proposal and said, "This is a real document. How long has this been going on?" I told him a few months. I downplayed everything. He was quiet for a long time, and then he said something I wrote down word for word in my phone that night because I never wanted to forget it. He said, So you've been playing business while I pay for everything. Okay, just don't let it get in the way of what actually matters. Then he put the printout on the counter and went upstairs to watch TV. I think it was Sports Center. Just walked away like I'd told him. I signed up for a pottery class. He thought it was a hobby, a little side project to keep the stay-at-home wife occupied. He didn't ask to see revenue numbers or client lists. He didn't ask because he had already decided it was nothing. That's the thing about people who have decided you're incapable. They don't interrogate your actions because they've already concluded those actions can't possibly amount to anything. At the time, Callaway Digital was on track for $738,000 in annual revenue. I had 28 clients and 3 subcontractors, and my husband had just patted me on the head and told me not to let my little project get in the way of doing the dishes. The full year revenue for 2024 came in at $738,000. I'd picked up contracts with 2 property management companies in the Phoenix area and started offering paid advertising management as a premium service tier. I brought on a 4th subcontractor for Google Ads optimization. The business was becoming a real agency, not just a freelancer with a list of clients. I told myself I'd come clean after tax season, then after summer, then after the holidays. The truth is, I was terrified of what would happen when he found out the full scope. Not that he'd be angry, that he'd find a way to take it from me. Now here's where the story turns, and not the way you might expect, because this is where I found out that I wasn't the only one in the marriage running a secret operation. In January 2025, I was looking for Caleb's birth certificate in Derek's home office filing cabinet. We needed it for a preschool registration form. Bottom drawer, way in the back, behind a stack of old car manuals, I think there was a Haynes manual for a Tacoma he sold in 2019. Why do men keep those? I found a folder labeled liability coverage. It was not liability coverage. Inside were wire transfer confirmations, an LLC registration in his brother Kyle's name for a company called Redstone Holdings, and property tax records for a rental condo in Mesa that I had never once heard mentioned. Derek and Kyle had purchased this condo in 2021. Using commissions, Derek had diverted through Kyle's LLC to keep off our joint finances. The property was assessed at $314,000 and had been generating rental income of about $200 a month for 3.5 years. None of it appeared on our taxes. None of it had ever been disclosed to me. Nearly $92,000 in rental income over 3 years, completely hidden. I photographed every single page, both sides, put the folder back exactly how I found it. Then I went and sat in my car in the garage for 10 minutes, just breathing. The AC wasn't even on. It was January, but this is Arizona, so it was still like 70 degrees in that garage. But here's what I need to be honest about, because this is the part that makes this story different from the version where I'm the righteous wife and he's the villain. My first thought wasn't just he lied to me. It was we've both been lying. I have a $738,000 business he doesn't know about. He has a rental condo I don't know about. We have been living in the same house, sleeping in the same bed, eating breakfast across from each other every morning, and we have both been hiding financial lives from each other for years. The difference felt clear to me right then. I'd been hiding because I was scared. He'd been hiding because he was greedy. But I also knew that moral distinctions and legal distinctions are not the same thing, and I didn't know which one a judge would care about. I called a divorce attorney named Rachel Herrera that same afternoon. Best phone call I ever made. Most terrifying, too. Rachel was methodical. She told me to change nothing about my daily routine. Keep going to the grocery store. Keep reviewing Sunday dinner plans with Diane. Don't rearrange anything in that filing cabinet. Don't give him any reason to suspect anything has changed. We spent the next 3 months quietly building the case. She brought in a forensic accountant named Paul who traced the Mesa condo's purchase funds back to Derek's commissions. Money that should have been reported as income and treated as marital property. The diversion pattern was clear once you knew where to look. Paul also identified 2 additional wire transfers to Redstone Holdings in 2023 and 2024 that didn't correspond to any property purchase, totaling $47,000. which appeared to be additional income Derek was sheltering through Kyle's entity. But here is the conversation that changed everything. Rachel sat me down and said, "Jenna, you have a hidden business too. I know Derek saw that proposal last June, but you deliberately minimized the scope when he asked. When this goes to discovery, and it will go to discovery, his lawyers are going to find Callaway Digital's full financials. $1.4 million in total billings, built from a folding desk in the corner of your bedroom, and a toilet seat in your bathroom. And his attorney is going to argue that your LLC is marital property that was built using marital resources during the marriage. We need to be ready for that fight, because it's coming, and he's going to have a case." That sentence just, I don't know how to describe it. Everything I thought I understood about my situation kind of collapsed in on itself. I had walked into her office thinking I was the victim with the evidence. She was telling me I was also the defendant. She asked me something I couldn't answer. She said, "Can you tell me, legally, why what you did is different from what Derek did?" I started to respond and stopped, because the real answer that my concealment was driven by survival, and his was driven by greed, is a moral argument, not a legal one. Arizona community property law doesn't care about your intentions. I had been thinking of myself as the protagonist of a clean story. Controlled wife finds evidence, hires lawyer, gets justice. Rachel made me see that a judge might look at the two of us and see the same thing. Two spouses who both concealed significant assets from each other. That scared me more than anything Derek had ever said to my face. Because Derek's cruelty, I understood. I knew how to live inside that. The possibility that I might legally be no better than him. I had no framework for that. None. I filed for divorce on April 14th, 2025, a Monday. Derek came home to papers on the kitchen island, and his first words were, "With what money are you going to pay for a lawyer?" I didn't deliver some rehearsed line. I slid Rachel's business card across the counter and said, "It's handled." He picked up the card, read it, put it down, and his face did something I'd never seen before. Not anger, not yet. Genuine confusion. Like the furniture had rearranged itself while he wasn't looking, and he couldn't figure out how. The discovery process was where everything detonated, and I need you to pay attention here, because what happened over the next 4 months was not an emotional drama. It was a legal chess match, and both players had their king exposed. Both sides were required to provide full financial disclosure. Rachel submitted the Callaway Digital records proactively and completely. Strategic decision. She explained the logic to me 3 times before I agreed. By volunteering the records, rather than having them dragged out through adversarial process, we positioned the disclosure as transparency and good faith. It also meant we could frame the fact that Derek already knew about my freelance work since June 2024, which undercut any argument of total concealment. We controlled the narrative of when and how the information entered the case. Derek's attorney, a litigator named Martin Hale who specialized in high-asset divorces, received my bank records, my LLC filings, my client contracts, my revenue statements, my subcontractor 1099s, all of it. $1.4 million in total billings. And that brings us to the moment I told you about at the start. That beige mediation room, the coffee machine gurgling, 3 years of records laid across the table. Derek going silent for almost a full minute, jaw tight, hands flat on the table. Then those 4 words, "You lied to me," and me sitting there, knowing everything I knew about Redstone Holdings, thinking we both did, but saying nothing. Martin Hale filed an emergency motion within 72 hours. His argument had 4 pillars, and I need to walk through them because this is where the story stops being emotional and starts being genuinely, uncomfortably complicated. First, he argued that my ability to build the business depended entirely on Derek covering 100% of household expenses. Mortgage, insurance, utilities, groceries, everything. Without that financial support, I couldn't have devoted the time required to grow a company. Derek's money freed my time, and that time became the business. Therefore, his financial contributions constituted an indirect but substantial investment. Second, he argued that I'd used marital property as business infrastructure. Our home internet connection, our electricity, the spare bedroom as an office, the bathroom, where I'd apparently built most of Q for 2023. The the printer that I'd accidentally used to expose my own secret, even our home address, which was linked to several digital accounts, small things individually, but they carry legal weight when you're building a community property claim. Third, and this was the argument that worried Rachel the most, Martin cited an Arizona Court of Appeals case from 2019 where a husband built a consulting business during the marriage while his wife worked full-time and covered household expenses. The court awarded the wife 45% of the business's valuation, holding that her financial support of the household was a material contribution to the business's creation. The factual parallels to my situation were Rachel's exact words uncomfortably precise. Fourth, Martin argued that I had actively concealed the business to prevent Derek from exercising his community property rights during the marriage, that even when confronted with the printed proposal in June 2024, I had deliberately misrepresented the scale and nature of the enterprise. This, he argued, constituted a breach of fiduciary duty between spouses, which under Arizona law can result in the non-breaching spouse receiving a disproportionate share of the concealed asset. I'm laying all this out because I need you to understand something that I had to understand myself. He wasn't entirely wrong. Not on all 4 points. Not morally, but legally, Martin had real ammunition. He drafted a proposed order that would have given Derek a 40% ownership stake in Callaway Digital, including a seat on any future advisory board and approval rights over major contracts. When Rachel showed me that proposal, I actually thought I was going to throw up. Not because it was outrageous, because parts of it weren't unreasonable. And that was worse. That was the worst month of my life. Worse than any of the years of belittlement. Because the years of belittlement were at least something I understood. This was the possibility that the one thing I built for myself, the proof that I wasn't nothing, could be legally handed over to the man who spent 8 years telling me I was. And the worst part was the voice in my head that kept saying, "But you did hide it. You did lie about it. You sat on that toilet building pitch decks while your husband slept, and you told yourself you were surviving. But the law might call it something else entirely." Meanwhile, Rachel was building our counteroffensive, and this is where Paul the forensic accountant earned every dollar of his fee. Rachel presented Paul's full findings during Derek's deposition. The Redstone Holdings, LLC, registered under Kyle's name. The Mesa condo purchase, funded by diverted commissions. The undisclosed rental income. The additional $47,000 in sheltered transfers. But Paul had gone further than just tracing the condo transactions. He'd obtained Derek's commission records from the brokerage through a subpoena and cross-referenced them against his reported income on 6 years of joint tax returns. The discrepancy wasn't limited to the Mesa condo. Over the period from 2020 to 2024, Derek had underreported his commission income by a total of $174,000. Some of it went to Redstone Holdings. Some of it went to a personal brokerage account that also wasn't on our tax returns. The pattern was systematic, and it painted a picture that went well beyond a brother helping a brother buy a condo. It looked like ongoing, deliberate tax fraud. When Paul walked through the transfers one by one during the deposition, reading amounts and dates in that flat accounting voice that makes everything sound like a weather report, Derek went gray. Not like a figure of speech. His actual face color changed. He didn't do anything dramatic. He just got very still and started rubbing his thumb along the edge of the conference table, back and forth, like he was trying to sand down reality into something he could manage. Kyle, who was also deposed, contradicted Derek's account on 2 key points about who initiated the LLC formation and who controlled the bank account. Their story fell apart because they'd never coordinated a unified version, which told me they never seriously considered the possibility that anyone would look. What followed was 4 months of the most exhausting, grinding negotiation of my life. Both sides had leverage. Both sides had exposure. The negotiation wasn't between me and Derek anymore. It was between Rachel and Martin, and it was surgical. Martin hammered relentlessly on the LLC being community property, citing the 2019 appellate case and 2 additional Arizona precedents where businesses were split even when only one spouse was actively involved. He argued that proactive disclosure didn't erase the years of concealment that preceded it. Rachel countered on 3 fronts simultaneously. First, the hidden condo and unreported rental income, which carried serious tax fraud implications beyond our divorce. Second, the $174,000 in underreported commissions, which meant every joint tax return we'd filed was fraudulent due to Derek's concealment, potentially exposing me to IRS liability for returns I'd signed in good faith. Rachel argued that any equitable distribution needed to account for the financial risk Derek had imposed on me by filing fraudulent joint returns without my knowledge. Third, Rachel emphasized the distinction that ultimately decided everything. Callaway Digital was built from my professional skills and labor. I hadn't diverted any marital funds. I hadn't created a shell entity to hide income from the government, and I had filed complete, accurate tax returns on every dollar of business revenue under my own name. The IRS knew about Callaway Digital. The IRS did not know about Redstone Holdings. There were 3 mediation sessions. The first one ended after 90 minutes when Derek stood up and said he wasn't going to sit here and be treated like a criminal while I got credit for doing the same thing he'd done. I remember sitting there thinking, he's not entirely wrong, and hating that thought so much I could feel it in my chest. Martin had to physically guide him back to his chair, and the mediator called a recess that never resumed. The second session was more productive, but ended when Martin proposed a 50-50 business split as a compromise from the original 40% plus governance rights. And Rachel responded by reading aloud the projected IRS penalty calculation for unreported income, including potential criminal referral language. Martin asked for an adjournment. The third mediation session is where it ended. Paul presented a comprehensive financial summary that laid bare the asymmetry of what each side had done. On one side of the ledger, my business, built during the marriage, yes. Concealed in its full scope, yes. Until I admitted to freelance work when Derek found the printed proposal, but fully tax compliant from day one. Revenue reported, $1,099, filed for every subcontractor. Estimated quarterly payments made to both federal and state. My CPA Helen's records were meticulous like color-coded spreadsheets meticulous. On the other side, Derek's concealment, Shell LLC in a family member's name. Diverted commissions, unreported rental income, $174,000 in income hidden from the IRS across 4 years. Every joint tax return we filed together was inaccurate because of information he withheld. When Paul finished and Rachel's tax attorney laid out the full scope of potential penalties, interest, and the strong likelihood of an IRS audit referral, Martin asked for a sidebar. They left the room for 45 minutes. When they came back, Derek looked like he'd aged 5 years. They were ready to negotiate for real. The final settlement was reached in mediation and approved by the judge on June 2nd. Here's what happened. I kept full ownership and operational control of Callaway Digital, but I was required to pay Derek a one-time equalization payment of $95,000 to settle the community property claim. The Mesa rental condo was awarded to me as an offset against the hidden income and diverted commissions. I sold it 3 weeks later for $327,000. Derek kept 70% of his disclosed retirement accounts. The family home, which appraised at $689,000, was sold, and the proceeds split 55-45 in my favor. Derek was ordered to pay $2,400 per month in child support, no spousal maintenance, which surprised me, but the judge noted in the order that I clearly had the independent means to support myself. The forensic accountant's findings regarding Derek's unreported income were referred to the IRS for further review. The mediator's notes specifically cited the asymmetry in tax compliance as the primary factor that influenced the distribution. Derek didn't end up destroyed. He's still working in real estate, though his brokerage placed him on a probationary review after the divorce filings became part of a compliance inquiry. And he lost his 2 biggest clients when details of the tax referral circulated through his professional network. He moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in Temp. He sees the kids every other weekend and Wednesday evenings. Last time he picked up Lily, he brought her a book about butterflies, and she talked about it for an hour. I stood in the doorway watching them leave, and I felt, I don't know, not anger. That's what surprised me. I'd been running on anger for so long that without it, I didn't know what shape I was. I bought a new place. 3 bedrooms, a big backyard for Lily and Caleb, and a second bedroom I converted into a proper home office with 2 monitors, a standing desk, and a whiteboard that takes up an entire wall. I work in daylight now. Not hidden, not at midnight, not with one ear listening for footsteps, not sitting on a toilet lid with a laptop on a bath towel. Callaway Digital just signed a 12-month contract with a regional HVAC franchisor covering 23 locations across Arizona and Nevada, and we're projecting $2 1 million in revenue for this year, though I'll be reinvesting heavily to bring on full-time employees and move into a proper office space. I have 6 subcontractors and 2 full-time hires. I brought my mom on part-time to handle invoicing and accounts receivable because when I finally told her everything, start to finish, she cried for an hour straight and then wiped her face and said, "Put me to work." Derek's mother, Diane, sent me a text 3 days after the settlement was finalized. It said, "I hope you're happy with what you've done to this family." I wrote 3 different replies and deleted all of them, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I had too many, and none of them were simple. But here's what I think about at 2 in the morning, when I still can't sleep. I wrote a check for $95,000 to a man who once screamed at me over a pair of children's sneakers. Rachel said that was a strong outcome, given the community property risk. She said some version of this case ends with him owning 40% of my company with a seat at the table. And she was right, and I trust her. But sometimes I sit at my desk, the proper one with 2 monitors, not the toilet, and I think about the fact that the only reason I won is because Derek forgot to pay taxes on his secrets, and I didn't forget to pay taxes on mine. That's it. That's the whole difference the law cared about. Not who was cruel, not who spent 8 years diminishing someone, not who controlled the bank account, or who monitored the parking receipts. The difference was paperwork. If Derek had run his concealment the way I ran mine, with a CPA and quarterly estimates and meticulous records, if he'd simply filed accurate returns on that rental income, this story might have ended with him owning 40% of my company and having approval rights over every contract I sign. The moral distinction I drew between us, that I hid out of fear and he hid out of greed, that I built something and he just buried money, none of that would have changed the judge's arithmetic. I don't know what to do with that. I don't know if it makes me lucky or strategic or just a better liar than my husband. I know I worked harder than I've ever worked in my life. I know I built something real from a folding desk and a bathroom floor while someone told me I was nothing. I know I filed every $1,099 and paid every quarterly estimate because my CPA Helen told me to, and I listened. But I also know I looked my husband in the eye across the breakfast table 1,000 mornings and hid a company worth more than our house from him. And I know that if the legal tables had been reversed, if I'd been the one with sloppy paperwork, and he'd been the one with clean returns, I would have lost everything I built. Everything. Lily starts first grade in the fall. Caleb is obsessed with dinosaurs and calls my office the fossil lab, which honestly is the best thing anyone has ever said about any room I've been in. I laugh every single day now. I didn't realize how long it had been since I actually laughed until I started doing it again, and the sound startled me. And I still can't sleep through the night. My body doesn't trust that it's allowed to rest. Or maybe it knows something I haven't fully admitted to myself, which is that the line between surviving someone and deceiving them is thinner than any courtroom can measure. I walked that line for 3 years. I won. And winning doesn't feel like what I thought it would feel like. It feels like writing a $95,000 check and knowing you got off easy. So I want to know what you think. Was what I did really different from what Derek did? Or did I just get away with it because my paperwork was better? I've been asking myself that question for months, and I don't have an answer. I'd like to hear yours.